They called her wild, a girl no man could tame, broken, silent, too dangerous to touch. People said she belonged in chains, not in the open fields. She didn't cry when she was sold. She didn't scream when they dragged her away. She just stared, eyes cold, heart colder. No one saw her pain, no one wanted to. But he did. A lonely rancher with more regrets than cattle. He bought her not for love, not for pity, but because something in her eyes looked just like his. He thought he was saving her, but what he didn't know was that she'd end up saving him, not with words, not with softness, but with fire, strength, and a kind of loyalty no one had ever shown him. She wasn't born to be owned. She was born to ride beside him, and when storms came, she didn't run. She held the reins and never let go. He had nothing left, not a family, not a future, not even hope. The ranch was dying, just like the fire inside him. Dust covered everything he touched. Nights were cold, days even colder. People had stopped calling. Debt kept growing. Then came the auction. He wasn't looking to buy, just watching, breathing, surviving. But then he saw her, a girl, maybe 17, silent, chained, eyes burning. Like wildfire, the crowd shifted away from her, like she carried a curse. One man muttered, "Too wild, not worth the trouble." Another said, "She bit her last owner." No one raised a hand, not even out of cruelty, but something inside him, something buried, moved. Maybe it was pity, maybe it was recognition, or maybe it was fate. His hand went up, just once, and the world around them changed forever. He didn't know her name, didn't know her past, but he was about to learn everything. He didn't know what he had brought home that day, only that she came with no name, no bags, and no voice. The girl wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat in front of him, wouldn't sit near the fire. She chose the barn instead of the house, curled up in hay like a wounded animal trying to disappear. He left a blanket. She never used it. He left food. She took it only when he wasn't looking. Days turned into weeks. She still hadn't said a word. He never asked why, never pushed. He knew what silence meant. He had lived with it too long himself. She flinched when the wind slammed doors. She froze if footsteps came too close. And when he tried to thank her once for feeding the chickens, she looked at him like he was holding a weapon. There was something sharp in her eyes, not anger, not fear, something deeper. A storm buried so far inside her that even kindness felt like a threat. But the rancher kept his distance, gave her room to breathe. He didn't try to save her. He just didn't leave. That made all the difference. Then one morning, before the sun rose, he saw the barn light flicker on. Curious, he walked quietly toward it. What he saw stopped him cold. She was inside, kneeling beside a wounded horse, the same stallion everyone said was untouchable, wild, violent, the one that had nearly killed a man last spring. But there she was, hands slow, calm, steady, cleaning the wound on its leg like she'd done it 1,000 times. The horse didn't fight, didn't even flinch. It watched her the way a storm watches the sea, ready to destroy, but waiting. And she didn't tremble, didn't speak. She just worked, eyes focused, like the whole world was that one horse, and nothing else existed. The rancher stepped back before she noticed him. For the first time, he didn't feel like he had taken her in. It felt like she belonged here more than he ever did. He started leaving her near the animals more often. She never asked. He never said a word, but she began to move with purpose, cleaning stalls, brushing coats, feeding them before dawn. Still no words, but her silence was changing. No longer heavy, now it had weight, presence, meaning. One evening, as he stood near the fence, he heard a soft sound behind him, barely a whisper. He turned. She was holding a saddle strap, torn, but fixable. She didn't say anything, just handed it to him and nodded once. It wasn't much, but it was the first thread of trust. He took it without speaking, nodding back, matching her quiet with his own. Something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it wasn't fear anymore either. She still wouldn't speak, but in her silence, she was telling a story he couldn't ignore, and he was finally listening. She didn't smile, but she stayed. Morning after morning, she showed up without being asked. The barn doors creaked open just before sunrise. And there she was, hair tied back, boots covered in dust, hands already working. She never looked at him directly, but she never looked away either. She mended broken fences, stitched torn saddles, brushed down horses that once kicked at every touch. The rancher watched from a distance, saying nothing, just learning her rhythms. She moved like the wind, quiet, fast, unpredictable, but never careless. There was something about the way she handled the land, like it wasn't new to her, like she'd grown up under the same sky, with the same dirt between her fingers. No one had trained her, no one had told her what to do, yet every task she took on, she finished with quiet precision. One afternoon, a neighbor stopped by, glanced her way, and asked, "Why do you keep her round?" The rancher paused before answering. Then he said softly, "Because she understands what it means to be broken and still keep going." The man laughed and shook his head, but the rancher meant every word. It wasn't about saving her anymore. She didn't need saving. She needed space to become whoever she was meant to be. And in her silence, she was already becoming something powerful. One evening, while repairing a fence post, she handed him a nail without him asking. Just one look, one step ahead. He didn't say thank you, but she nodded anyway, and for a second, he thought he saw the corner of her lip twitch almost like a smile. Then gone again. He never pressed it. He let her lead the silence, and slowly, the silence started to shift. It wasn't cold anymore. It wasn't heavy. It felt familiar, even safe. The horses calmed when she entered the barn. The dogs followed her without command. Even the wild stallion, the one no one dared approach, lowered its head when she passed. She hadn't spoken a single word to him, not one. Yet somehow, they were speaking all the time. In the way she handed him tools before he reached for them. In how she worked beside him, without question or complaint. In how, one day, she left a small leather pouch on the porch, his old knife, cleaned and sharpened, returned without a note. It was the quietest bond he had ever known, but it was real, real enough to feel, real enough to stay, and deep down, he knew this wasn't a girl just surviving anymore. This was someone learning how to live again, not because of him, but beside him. There was still pain in her eyes, still questions in her silence, but now there was something else too. Something growing, steady, unseen, a bond, unspoken yet unbreakable. The days had settled into a rhythm, quiet, steady, almost peaceful, but peace doesn't last long on a land that remembers pain. That night, the wind came fast, howling across the hills like something angry had been set loose. Thunder cracked overhead, and the sky turned black. He stepped outside to check the stables, but lightning struck before he could reach the gate. In seconds, flames roared through dry hay and wood, climbing faster than he could think. Horses screamed. The sky lit up red. He ran toward the fire, eyes burning, lungs tightening, heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. He stumbled into the smoke, calling out blindly, coughing, choking, but he couldn't see. Panic hit him like a hammer. Then suddenly, through the smoke, she appeared. Her face was streaked with soot, eyes sharp, movements calm. She didn't wait for orders. She moved like the fire owed her something. One by one, she led the horses out, ropes in hand, her voice low and firm, whispering something he couldn't hear, but the animals seemed to understand. Flames snapped at her heels, but she never flinched. A beam crashed behind her, barely missing her shoulder, but she didn't stop. He tried to reach the last stall, but the heat pushed him back. His legs buckled, vision blurred. He hit the ground, the world spinning in smoke and sparks. Then she was there again, grabbing his arm, pulling him with a strength he didn't know she had. The roof groaned above them, ready to fall. She dragged him outside, just as it collapsed behind them in a roar of flame and ash. They landed hard in the dirt, coughing, gasping, shaking. For a moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled behind them, but all he could hear was her breath, fast and sharp. He turned to look at her, really look, and in that moment, he realized something had changed. Not just in the fire, not just in her, but between them. She met his eyes, and for the first time, she wasn't hiding. There was no fear, no walls, just truth. And then she spoke. Her voice was low, rough, like it hadn't been used in years. but every word hit with the force of a storm. "You saved me," she said, "the day you didn't walk away." He froze, not because of what she said but because of how she said it, like it had been waiting inside her all this time, building, burning, just like the fire, and now it was free. She stood up first, brushed the ash from her hands, and walked back toward the smoldering barn. He watched her go, heart heavy and full all at once. She had faced the flames for him, and now he knew she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was protecting what mattered, not with fear, not with silence, but with fire of her own. Seasons changed, and so did she. The wildness in her eyes remained, but the fear was gone. She no longer flinched at kindness, no longer hid in silence. She walked the land like she owned it, not with arrogance, but with quiet strength. The ranch, once crumbling, began to breathe again. Fences stood straighter, horses ran freer. The man who once lived in shadows now stood in the light because of her. She wasn't his servant, wasn't his rescue, and never his possession. She was his equal, his partner, his proof that some broken things don't stay broken forever. And when she rode beside him, boots in the stirrups, wind in her hair, eyes fixed on the horizon, it was clear she had never been lost, just waiting for a place to be found. And when strangers asked who she was, he smiled and said softly, "She's not just someone I saved, she's the reason I was saved too."